Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility.
Hey there, Springs in the Desert listeners. I'm Jillian, your podcast host, and we are coming to you during the theme of We're Part of the Church. And today we get to talk about the Diocesan Church with a lovely guest I have today by the name of Mikki Sciba. It's so good to have you, Mikki. How are you today?
I'm great. I am so excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. The episode that aired before this is about the local church. We interviewed two wives of priests in the Byzantine church
Mm.
and what it's like to serve alongside their husbands and like in the local church and what that looks like in a parish setting. And I'm so excited to take it one step further to talk about diocesan life and what that might look like to serve those who have infertility and what it looks like to serve in a season of infertility. And so, just to begin, Mikki, would you just be willing to introduce yourself, share a little bit about how your story relates to Springs in the Desert and what we do here and what you do at the diocese?
Absolutely. So my name is Mikki Sciba. I am married almost 19 years to my wonderful husband, Matthew. I have three children. Two of them are adopted. One that came to us through the miracle of neprotechnology. He is now 9. So my youngest is 9, my oldest is 14. And I went to Benedictine College knowing that I wanted to do youth ministry and something with like religious education because I had a big conversion in high school. And from that, it just catapulted into youth ministry, teaching at Catholic schools, to diocesan ministry. And God has just shown us step by step where He wants us to go. And it's been a beautiful journey. So,
Absolutely. I just appreciate that our listeners tell us that they really relate to different stories. And even if our stories don't look the same, to just hear little bits, just ongoing conversions, and we can meet the Lord at different points in our life and to have your heart and your yes say yes at that beautiful moment, which is such an important moment in a person's life, right? Like our youth and our heart is so, we're discerning so many things and searching for so many things at that. And so that's so beautiful. So thank you for that.
oh,
And
God realizes that I need very clear signs. So He's made His mission for me almost impossible to not know what He's speaking. And it
yeah,
has been such a beautiful journey, to be quite honest, to really learn to uncover different ways my life would take shape. Because I thought when my husband and I were married, I thought we'd get pregnant right away. We both wanted as many children as God would bless us with. And after 5 years, we didn't have any. And so the pain of that was very real. And all of our friends started having children. So I still
yep.
remember, it's very vivid in my heart. And so to be able to talk about how God has navigated and guided me in my life in learning that infertility for me is a gift, not a burden, and that God calls us all to be life givers. And for some of us, it's very physical with bearing of children. And for some of us, it definitely takes on a more spiritual dimension, to which I'm 41. So, to which now in my life, I have really been able to see the blessing of being able to make myself at the disposal of God and His church in a way that I probably wouldn't have if my time and energy was taken up by littles, which is a beautiful life. But this other life is also a calling and also very beautiful. And the way that God has revealed His will for me and my family has just been beautiful.
I love that. That the summary is just what we hope really to share with all of the community here at Springs in the Desert. That, yeah, it doesn't always, or maybe even most of the time, feel like a gift when we have just such a big desire that is seemingly unfulfilled, right? In
Mhm.
that very literal sense, but that God is providing so many avenues to give life to the world. And that's not a like a second class or a second rate blessing, that it's a
Yeah.
beautiful, equally life-giving gift. And so I that's so beautiful. Mikki, would you share a little bit about what you have done at the diocesan level? What is your relationship to a diocese right now?
Sure. So now I'm in the Diocese of Tyler. My husband and I moved here in 2018. And I was in high school. I was a high school religion teacher for 11 years before I ever did diocesan work. So when we moved here, I started working in the diocese as a catechetical specialist. And so I would go around and talk to catechists about how to best teach in the religious education classroom. I did some writing with some faith formation materials, like with the baptism program and sacramental prep and how to incorporate family. So it was definitely very, again, this is a God thing, going from teaching high school kids to now teaching catechists and then program development for, and yeah, definitely not anywhere that I thought I'd been or thought I would be years ago. But then when COVID hit, my husband and I felt God calling me to be home. And so now I work part-time for the diocese and still go around and speak and do special needs ministry also with the church. And I get to homeschool my kids, which has also been another journey in and of itself. But we have almost completed year 4, heading into year 5. And so just being able to take all of these things along the way to share in really whatever way the diocese needs me, which has been great. I've been able to be a mentor. My husband and I have been able to be a mentor couple for those going through marriage prep. We've spoken at marriage retreats. I've done a lot of talks to catechists, and again, it's hard to remember all of the things that God has allowed us to do in this time.
Yeah.
So
How would you say that your experience of infertility, your journey of adoption, and just the surrender of your life of receiving what God has given you impacted the way that you serve the diocese or in your home? What does that look like for you?
So it has definitely stretched my heart in ways that I could not have imagined before, because the desire for children and the desire to expand the domestic church, your family, is part of God's design. And so at the beginning of my infertility journey, I really felt defective. I felt like I was not able to accomplish the will of God because there was this impediment. And I didn't know I was going to have any issues. And no one ever talked about it, like in marriage preparation at the time. And I don't think that's the fault of the church. I think it's just that's not everyone's normal idea. Like children may happen right away or may not, or not at all. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we had to really struggle through finding resources. And now I feel like there's a wealth of resources out there for infertility couples and for couples struggling with that. And then ultimately realizing that openness to life is the calling of every couple. But that openness to life will definitely take on its own course as God reveals his will for you. And that there's no consolation prizes in God's will, right? there's
Yes.
no,
Oh, that's
there's,
beautiful.
there's no, this is the ultimate. And then, oh, wait, you're a second class citizen because that you can't achieve this through no fault of your own. And so I guess you'll just do this. And that's not, in my experience, I do not believe that is how God works. That there is a calling for the mother who's been able to have 5, 6, 7, 8 children. There's a wonderful family that I know in my parish that has 11, and they're wonderful human beings. And then there's some that's only been able to have 1 or none. And there is beauty in discovering how God is revealing his will and how he wants your relationship with him to take shape in this. And for me, it took a lot of time to really be, I don't know, comfortable is not the word, but embracing and accepting that God's will for me is beautiful and it's not second class and it's not some less worthy or less intentional, less divinely inspired mission. And so just like couples have to discern on the expansion of their families, so too do infertile couples, I feel, have to discern how is God calling us to be open to life in this season? Because we may not know what's going to happen in the future, but that doesn't mean that we're dormant.
A really beautiful explanation. Some of the resources that we offer at Springs, we try to give space for couples to recognize that infertility is something to be grieved, right? But that's not the ending point that we are an Easter people and Alleluia is our song, right? That we as you said, we don't have to remain dormant and feel as if that, yeah, that God has a less beautiful plan for us if the desire for children has not been fulfilled, or as many children as we were hoping to, or a diagnosis has come our way. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I also like that, when you were talking about marriage prep, that sometimes it can feel retrospectively. I remember feeling after also 5 years not being able to have any children, like, "Why didn't anyone talk to me about this or prepare me for this possibility?" I feel like a lot of the conversations in marriage prep were sort of under the assumption that maybe we wouldn't want to have children right away, and so how can you use churning to know your body and to be able to discern each month to month? And they're beautiful conversations, like, they were, but not, and of course, you can't cover every possible caveat, right? Chris O'Neill is in a diocese also. We've had a few conversations with him and just talking about, right, like, you can't possibly cover every single circumstance that could ever possibly happen in marriage prep.
Right.
But
Unless you want it to last 20 years.
yeah, exactly. But I am curious, what would you say from the diocesan perspective, and generally, is there room for growth in serving couples in that marriage prep process or after marriage who are struggling with infertility? Where do you think, if a diocesan leader is listening to this podcast, what would maybe be like one word of encouragement or one way that they could help serve couples who might experience this or are experiencing this?
So, one of the things I would suggest is if there is some way to collect a database of people that you already know in your diocese who have already struggled with this issue, because that there's a lot of just being understood in that circumstance, like a mentor couple. Like, I know many dioceses have mentorships where engaged couples have a mentor, and those mentors talk to them about marriage life and answer questions, and they have discussions. Um, and knowing who those mentors are, but also on the other end, if you ever hear couples who are open about their infertility struggle in their life, in that asking them like, hey, could we have you on a database? So if anyone comes across us, we can send them your way. And our marriage formation director, she's a dear friend of mine, Deanna Johnston, and I'll give a shout out to her. She's wonderful. But anytime she hears something, she always texts me like, hey, can I send someone your way? And I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. And so just if there's a way to build up that database of people in your diocese, because there are people who are looking for resources. I don't know percentages, but I would have felt very uncomfortable reaching out to like our diocesan administrator. That could be a personal flaw of mine. But we also were a big diocese, the Diocese of Galveston, Houston, where I initially worked. And then I'm sure they had resources, but because I didn't know them, I don't know. I just felt isolated. And so when you already feel isolated, just because those conversations aren't like just out there, people don't know how to navigate those really. So I don't think it was anyone's fault. It was just isolating. And so I don't know. I honestly don't know. Had I known that there was a resource, I don't know if would have reached out. I think a lot of it just comes from having people who have lived that be willing to share their stories. I think there's a lot to say about personal experience and how the Lord has helped us navigate that, which is great. But also, I think just a lot of it is discernment for each couple. Just like not every family who doesn't struggle with infertility looks different. Every family that does struggle with infertility, that's going to look different. And how God is going to call you to be open to life and to be life giving is going to look different. So I just think a lot of it is having a network, people that you can refer others to, or just some sort of open discussion or parish wide. Even if you go by deaneries, okay, we're going to have one night, because if you're just trying to serve your parish, your numbers might actually be quite small. Not necessarily because there's not that many people who struggle with it, but because of time, location, all that stuff. But yeah, I think just offering, like making it part of an everyday conversation. These are people that we should be aware of and minister to. And it's an important, and God has a mission for them. So I actually don't know if that answered your question, but
Yes. Yeah, no, I did. And I think it actually it gives it gave a great understanding, I think, from both perspectives that our diocesan staff are trying to serve us the best that they can, but there are a lot of obstacles that they face too, to trying to connect everyone with resources that they need. But our church is universal. And so I love that idea of a network that whether maybe someone would feel more comfortable going to their parish priest to say, hey, like I would really love to be able to connect with someone who has the same experience. And maybe then that priest would have resources at the diocesan level to say, okay, I know several people that I could connect you with. And so I really like that idea because we want to be heard. We want to have community. And as you said, infertility can feel so isolating. And so to have people, not just a brochure or not just a video, and those are good, they can be good things and good starting points. But to have someone, a friendship, a community based built, I think is really great.
I think something
Go
too
ahead.
very simple is just having a resource page. That's huge just because I majored in theology. So I knew a lot of the church's teaching on what was acceptable for like fertility treatment. And so that wasn't something that I really had to learn about just because I had a background in it. But I'm sure there are many couples who don't. And so I do think part of maybe marriage formation, and it does not have to be a long talk, but just to mention, hey, if there is a struggle with infertility, the church actually does have teachings that relate to that. And here are resources. Like you can briefly describe what they are and then resources. And so then if someone finds themselves in that place, they're like, okay, I know where to go. I felt
Absolutely.
like my husband and I, we were just like, we don't really know where to go. And it could have been my lack of research, or it could just been a lack of resources. So I'm trying to remember back then, but I think had someone said in my formation when I was looking forward to the marriage and what, God was going to bring that, hey, this actually might be a possibility. And here's statistics of people who struggle with infertility. So if it doesn't happen right away, we have mentors, we have people that you can talk to. There are ministries out, there's medical help for you that are totally in alignment with Catholic teaching, just so people know and they know where to
Yes.
go. And I think
Yep.
sometimes not knowing where to go is honestly like half the battle.
Yes. I second that, Mickey, because that's one of our big efforts is connecting with dioceses around the country and even around the world, really. We have some connections in other countries as well. The first step is getting something on their website so that if a couple who maybe doesn't know the director or doesn't feel comfortable, like you said, talking to someone at the diocese about this experience, that some of those resources and those options and links to places that the church teaches about various things are so helpful because then couples can take that and feel empowered to discern well and really pray and find what path it is that God is calling them to next. So yes, I love that suggestion. This is a question that's on the other side of it. How would you encourage couples who are carrying this cross to be more involved in diocesan life, right? That, of course, there's parish life and being involved locally. And how can we help build up the diocese together as a body of Christ?
I'm so glad that you brought that up because, and this was something that I felt in my initial struggles is like, the church needs to serve me. The church needs to serve me. I'm having this struggle. I need to be carried right now. This burden feels too heavy. And I don't know how much of that I really looked at and, okay, but what's my responsibility in that relationship? Now, again, we've all almost been married for 20 years. And so now it's easier for me to, okay, there are definitely responsibilities that I need to take. And part of that was just learning how to grieve is one. So maybe even learning who those Catholic counselors are or where you could go if the grief is something that is still very raw and very real that you haven't. I do think there has to be a processing of the grief. So that way, whatever ministry grows out of that restoration is pure and authentic and not just like a band aid. Because I think that
Yes.
we need to be whole and healed, or at least on our way to healing, I don't think our ministry should be the Band-Aid to cover up this wound. I think we need to address the wound and to work through it and process it in order to be like the best self that God wants to use in whatever he's calling us to next. So I would even say resources for just like looking into how can I be healed first and foremost, because there is grief. It is a very real loss. Father's Day, Mother's Day, so many other, I can't even think, but so many other things within the church that even though those are not religious holidays, I understand that. But sometimes people make a big deal out of that, like at Mass. It's just all of those things are just things that I had to learn to grieve properly. And that has taken a hot minute for me, for me to learn to do that. So I would just encourage people first and foremost to take responsibility for where am I at and what healing needs to take place? And do I just need to allow myself space to grieve? And then from that, moving on to, okay, is God calling me to welcome physical children into my home through adoption, through foster? Because that's a whole beast in and of itself. We have done both. And we recently were discerning being foster parents, and then lots of things happen. And maybe this isn't God's will for us. And each situation is so different. And each time you start to learn, there's still grief. But it's not like, I don't want people to think that, or the church to even teach that just because you can't have physical children, that you have to have other children. But then there's very few resources for how to navigate that, because adoption and foster care is actually I found it quite complicated.
Yes.
Learning how to navigate that, and expensive with adoption. And so all of those things are just things to bring about into your prayer life, into hopefully a couple or a priest that you can trust to help guide you if that's needed. But also it may not be God's calling for you to have physical children in your home. And there's a beautiful call to spiritual fatherhood and spiritual motherhood. And then just learning. So I don't know necessarily if this would relate to like infertility, like small group discussions, in as much as it would be discernment for God's will. Because at some point, all couples are going to be infertile because of age. And the gift of fertility is God's gift for a purpose. And God's gift of infertility, it's going to have a purpose. And when you've grown out of that fertile cycle, which every couple is going to go through at some point, there's still a purpose. And so I think in our life, just learning discernment, just constantly not ever settling into a way of life, but a constant, Lord, direct me. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation, because at some point, everyone will be in this stage of not having children.
Yeah. Yes.
And then what does our life look like? And some of us just go through that much earlier.
Yeah, that I really love everything you have framed, because that God has a purpose for us. So like our sole purpose is not just to have children. And of course that, as you said, beautiful, such a beautiful gift. And whether that's biologically, adoptive, spiritually, there's so many beautiful avenues of life that God has provided. But if we are not able to have children, that doesn't mean that our life is without purpose and that he doesn't have a plan and a direction. And I think I love that you talked about discernment, because Springs goes on the road and we give retreats around the country. And that is a piece that we are hoping to develop even more, is really having a retreat dedicated to what is the charism of your family? What does that look like? Because sometimes it can feel, we talked about this in a parish life conversation, that it can feel like if you don't have children in your home, you get all the like leftover opportunities at the parish, or like the things that people can't do because they have children. It doesn't work for them to do this, or you're expected to say yes to things because you have this availability. And if we flip that on its head and so, God, what do you want for us? What is our calling as a couple? Where are you asking us to serve? Then we could give this wholehearted yes to whatever it is that he's calling us to. And it doesn't really even matter what the circumstances are outside of that, because God is just simply calling you to that that opportunity or that gift or that person that you're helping. And so yes, I love this discernment piece that you brought up there. I would love to talk to you for much longer because I just want to dive deeper. Chat to have you back, Mikki.
Would love that. I can't believe the time passed so quickly.
I know some of our listeners might not know though that you also are on another podcast. So if someone wanted to find you there, what is that podcast called?
It's called Life Beyond the Chariot. It is through the Diocese of Tyler with my dear friend, Deanna Johnston. And this was actually something that developed out of COVID. We're like, we want to still be able to talk to people. And what if we ever did a podcast? And so we just did. We started it. And we really just talked to it from the perspective of moms and women trying to lead holy lives. And life is messy. And it's okay for it to be messy, but it's also important to learn how to maybe still discern, like, what is God calling us to do in these, maybe the stickiness of family life. And yeah, so it's called Life Beyond the Chariot.
Okay, wonderful. We'll make sure to link that in our show notes so that if someone wanted to keep up with you and see and hear from you and see from you more, they will find that there. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, Mikki. It was so good to get to know you.
Oh, you too. And I would be happy to be back on. I had a whole list of notes. I was like, and this is what I do all the time with Deanna when we have a podcast. I have so many notes and we don't even get to half of it.
Yes. We look forward to having you back. Absolutely, for sure. And listeners, just know that wherever you are on the path of infertility or loss, we are walking with you. We're praying for you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.